That's great. So I haven't fully prepared my sort of campaign materials, I guess, for this year yet, because it is still kind of early, but I'm happy to sort of tell you about myself and give you the more casual intro. So I am faculty at Baylor College of Medicine currently in Houston. I've been here about 5 years now. Before that, I was in private practice in the community in the Seattle area. So I have a little bit of community experience. That's what I did my first 3 years out of residency. And I did residency in Michigan. So I've been a little bit of all over the place. And I've, been involved with the chapters in all 3 states before I got here. I was on the board for Texas College of Emergency Physicians when I first got elected to the ACEP board, but I've rolled off of that now. But I've been on the ACEP board, for 3 years now, finishing up my third year. I've been loving it. One thing that I'm passionate about that ACEP does is supporting young physicians. And so I've been working on doing a little bit more of that this year, and I can talk to you a little bit more about what I've been doing there. I'm also passionate about advocacy, and sort of how I grew up in ACEP was through getting involved with the Leadership and Advocacy Conference. I was on the EMRA board in an advocacy position. I was the chair of the state legislative committee. So our advocacy work is super important to me and something that I hope to continue in my next term. My opinion is that the primary mission of ACEP is being an advocate for the emergency physician, and particularly for the individual emergency physician in the challenges that we're facing. So I think our response to COVID-19 has been a great example of that. So the challenges that we've had as individual emergency physicians have included educational challenges. This is a new disease. Like, how do we know exactly what's going on with it, how to treat it? Information's changing all the time. So I think that the educational materials that ACEP put together for that were great. I think another thing that individual physicians were looking for in the face of COVID was community and a space to talk about the issues they were facing in their hospitals. So I think that the Engage ED platform was actually a great response to that, and opportunity to have a somewhat curated, and we could hear a little bit from what was going on from a staff perspective as well when we brought up issues, but also a place where the staff was hearing us and we could say, hey, we're having issues with our hospital not letting us wear our own PPE. And so then that's where ACEP could use that platform that was both creating education and community for members to then take that and then be the advocate for us that they need to be. So I think the work that we've been doing and talking to the CDC and talking to OSHA and talking to CMS about the issues that we're facing with COVID is super important. And a great example of the advocacy work that we can do. And it's been fairly effective, and they're still engaged in conversations right now about issues like hazard pay that still aren't resolved at this point. I mean, I think it's kind of the same answer, that being an advocate is super meaningful to me. I think it's easy to get kind of caught in the grind of emergency medicine sometimes. And there's fulfillment to be had in certain patient encounters, and I certainly derive that. But there's also so many systems issues that we're at the foundation of when we're working in emergency medicine. And it can be easy to get caught up in the frustrations about, care that your patient can't access, and administrative requirements that are being put on you. And I'm someone who, has a tendency to get frustrated by those problems. So to me, it's super important to be involved in trying to be a solution to those problems, not just accept those problems and try and, keep churning through the day, but to feel like I'm spending at least part of my time in trying to solve those problems, and not just for myself. I might be able to do something in my hospital that solves the problem for me and my colleagues, but are there things that we can do nationally to solve these problems and make a difference for everyone? I mean, that's hugely meaningful to me. And kind of expands my work outside of just the patients that I see. I think my advocacy background is a bit of a unique skill, but I certainly feel like we're all advocates on the board of directors as well. I think I do bring a little bit of the combined community academic perspective that some people have been either on one track or the other, and the ability to have been in both practices and been in practice in multiple states reasonably recently is valuable to me. It gives me a little bit of a breadth beyond my personal experience. I think that as a young physician, I know that I've benefited from leadership development programs. And so I am sort of developing my skills in being able to bring that to other people and be part of the solution to problems there. Unique is a hard word, right? Because if I say anything about myself now, am I implying that other board members don't also have these abilities? And I don't mean to do that. I think we have a very talented board, and a lot of people have an excellent skill set. I am somewhat known on the board for being kind of detail oriented, like reading all the stuff and bringing up the issue on page 17 that some other people had not noticed. And I am proud of that. And I'm not afraid to speak up about it, but also in a collaborative way. I think I'm a collaborative leader that does a good job of sort of bringing other people on the board into, you know, seeing things in different ways, but also like coming to a conclusion that benefits all of us. I think that like collaborative quality and communication is a super important one. And the ability to sort of see the issues that we're facing in a broader context is really important. But, you know, being a board member is a very collaborative activity. So being willing to have the side conversations that you need to have and like look at different ways to solve problems, I think is really important. And I've certainly been developing those skills in my 3 years as a board member so far. And just sort of like learning the systems of how the college works and how different things can be brought to the college and by what different entities, and how to educate members about how to bring in issues that are important to them. You know, I definitely had a decent sense of that before being on the board, but after 3 years on the board, I think I have another level of sort of sophistication in my ability to do that. And I think being able to bring the issues that we're discussing to other general members and being able to help general members bring their issues to us and making sure that two-way communication is open is really important, as well as being able to communicate within ourselves as members of the board and communicate with staff. So for ACEP in particular, I'm concerned about our membership. We are not yet seeing declining membership, but if you look you consider the fact that we're seeing an increasing number of residencies. So there are more and more physicians who are potentially eligible for membership in ACEP. They're either board eligible or board certified. We are not seeing the rise in membership that we should be seeing with that increasing number of eligible members. So I am worried.
And Alison?
Yep.
Why do you think that is?
I think that we are not strong enough in our advocacy for the individual emergency physician. That's like was part of my answer to the very first question that you asked about what I think is so important that ACEP is doing. I think that we have started to be seen as an advocate for the business of emergency medicine and not as much for the individual emergency physician. And that message isn't resonating as much, particularly for young physicians. So we need but I don't think we're doing the wrong things. I think we are doing that individual advocacy that's so important. But I think we need to work on getting that message out to the membership or potential membership in this case. And
do you think that the complement of the board, because of the business of emergency medicine, is inhibiting young physicians from joining? And for those of us that have spent the majority of our careers in community practice, that we're exceptionally frustrated by the lack of advocacy for emergency physicians in terms of fair employment practices, fair compensation, and for being appreciated by the hospitals that we work with as real leaders within the departments and as experts in our field versus just being an employee that punches a clock.
Right. I think that there's more that we could do in that arena. And I think that by doing more in that area, that will help solve our membership problems. So I think you mentioned like the complement of the board. I think it's a challenging issue because as more and more emergency physicians are employed by these large groups, we want to make sure that folks who are employed by large groups don't feel like they are singled out or in some way viewed unfavorably by the college, while at the same time still doing what we can to advocate for all the practice types, particularly the groups that may not have as many other venues for advocacy. So the smaller, more independent groups. I think it's really important that we.
I might look at it a different way, in that not that we look down upon folks that work for contract management groups, because I do. I think more importantly is if you look at the complement of the board, those people that work for contract management groups are also part of the senior executive leadership of those corporations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when the rubber meets the road, that's where there's a lot of concern on behalf of rank and file emergency physicians, because I don't know how those folks can separate their employer from their role as board members advocating for emergency physicians.
I think transparency on that is super important. I think when people are voting, they don't always, this is something that the council steering committee talked about. I sat in on their Zoom meeting, although I wasn't part of it, and particularly could have been seen as having a conflict of interest on this part because it had to do with campaign materials. But there was a discussion that I thought was really important, talking about the campaign materials and how people list their employer, and how maybe if you're paid by 1099, you could say that you're self-employed, and that's sort of true, but isn't fully explaining what your role is within the larger group that you're working for, and how sort of identifying those leadership positions and everything for transparency is really important. And I agree with you that that is a conflict of interest that we need to, be aware of and concerned about, and bear in mind as council is making their decisions. And I supported, in my head, I did not have a voice in this conversation, but I supported the efforts that the council steering committee was talking about making in order to make the campaign documents more clear in terms of what all of people's roles at their job that pays most of their salary are.
Hey, are ACEP board of director meetings open to the public, to the membership to attend?
Yes, and I don't think we do a good enough job, and I've talked about this, and I hope that there will be more of an opportunity with our new executive director to maybe actually act on some of these things that I've been thinking about. But we don't do a good job of communicating to our membership when our board meetings are in advance and what issues will be on the agenda at our board meetings. And they are open board meetings, so it should be very clear, particularly to leaders such as counselors, such as state chapter officers. They should know in advance what we're talking about and have the opportunity to either be there or call in or, contribute to the conversation. Even talk to a board member if there's something that's particularly important. All the materials can't possibly go out to every member of the college, right? So we got to figure out something that's reasonable. But right now, I think it can be pretty black box, and that's something that frustrated me before I was on the board. That I felt like it was hard to engage with the material that they were going to talk about when I was going to board meetings but wasn't yet a board member. We go into executive session rarely, and those are the only elements of the meeting that aren't open to the membership, and that's usually to talk about legal issues. And I don't think that's the biggest consideration for our members who'd like to be involved. So I'd like to see us posting more on the website, making the agenda more open, having it shown further in advance. I mean, until I'm board chair, I think I'm gonna, have some struggles in executing that, but I would love to see us move that direction. And I think that that kind of thing will increase member engagement and then help with membership issues too. If people have opportunities to have leadership development and know what's going on and be more engaged, I think they're gonna tell their friends and everyone's gonna want to be more involved and maintain their membership in the future.
Well, what's you said something there at the end about being board chair. What is the impediment to making these meetings more open through Zoom or whatnot, now that folks in the last 3 months have had to become much more comfortable with remote meetings?
It's true. And our June board meeting will be held via Zoom. I think that the chair of the board and our staff both have to be a little bit more comfortable with that change. When we've had some conversations about it in the past, it's been like, well, if people email me, they can know this isn't secret information. But I think it shouldn't be information that you have to pull. I think it should be information that we push out, and that you can, if it's 2 a.m. and you're at a slow site, that you could go to the ACEP website and pull up some info on when the next meeting is and what issues we're going to be discussing.
Thank you.
Because that also would allow for some greater transparency and accountability on behalf of the board members.
I would love to see more transparency in general with the board. And I hope I can talk with the new executive director about that as sort of a first step in that direction. So I think we'll be having phone calls with her coming up soon. And I look forward to that bringing upon us some structural changes in how the board is run, because I think there'd be some benefit to that for sure. Change is hard. The board meetings have kind of been done the way that they're done now for a long time, and we don't have a lot of staff turnover in terms of the staff who are particularly working with the board and on the board meetings. And so there's a lot of momentum that needs to be like shifted a little bit in the move towards transparency. But I'm hoping as I become a more senior board member and then potentially, you know, have future leadership roles on the board, that combined with the new executive director will bring some opportunities for that.
Wave to me if you need me to come in.
So I think the COVID has probably prompted, like I always saw telemedicine and telehealth as part of the future of emergency medicine. I asked to be assigned to the telehealth section, and so I've been working with them because I thought it was important for several years. I think COVID is going to accelerate the move towards telehealth. And I think in emergency medicine, we are the acute care experts, the acute undifferentiated complaint experts. And so it's important that emergency medicine be positioned prominently in terms of telehealth, telemedicine opportunities for folks who are looking for acute care complaints and 24/7. So I think given how precipitously we saw volumes drop with COVID, that there is some risk that we won't fully rebound. My opinion is that we're going to very much mostly rebound. Maybe I'm biased because I'm at a county hospital in Houston and we've pretty much already fully rebounded. Texas is of course more open than many other states, so that might be part of it. But I sense that we're going to see a near full rebound, but that still that the telehealth, telemedicine opportunities are going to be out there, and that it's important that we take advantage of those and sort of show the healthcare community our expertise in this space. That's the single biggest one I can think of.
So you have been active in 3 different chapters. What role do you think the chapter should play in working with ACEP and the board?
I think that it's important that the board hear the voice of the chapters and make sure we have adequate resources devoted to providing resources for the chapters without overriding the chapters on any state issues that might come up where there might be some disagreements between the state board and the national board. That if there's a state policy or state regulatory issue, that the opinion of the state chapter where they're living and knowing and deeply understanding and it's going to impact them the most takes precedence. But at the same time, if the state chapter is struggling and needing some resources to help with an advocacy challenge that they're facing, that it's important for national to make those things available on a prompt basis. So that was definitely something I saw as state ledge chair, is the need for a balance there of providing resources, but allowing full autonomy for states to make their own decisions. The sort of difference in chapter size is really interesting to me. Michigan's a very large chapter, Texas is a very large chapter, Washington's a much smaller chapter. I think that one of the things that I really am passionate and excited about working on is leadership development in various chapters. So a lot of states have these leadership development programs, but it's definitely not all the states, and it would be hard for a small state to develop that program completely themselves. I mean, some of our states have barely 100 members. But I think communication between those leadership development programs is an opportunity that we haven't yet taken advantage of, sharing best practices of what's working for your state, what could potentially work in another state, and then networking the people who are in those leadership development programs so that they can get to know others who are in their generation of ACEP leaders in different states would be really cool as well. So that's actually a project I'm working on. We got a little delayed because of COVID, and we were planning on some in-person activities at LAC, which of course didn't happen, but I have not given up yet. We're going to be having a webinar in June probably, and then opening up a base camp space and trying to foster that. But that's an example for me of how state size can vary, but also that there's programming like this leadership development programming that can really only be executed at a more local level, because that person-to-person interaction is so important, and we just can't offer that nationally on such a regular basis. And there's incredible mentors in all of our states for these junior members who are interested in leadership as well. And the other thing that I'm hoping will come out of that is that it's not just leadership development for you to be a leader within ACEP, but that it's leadership development for you to be a leader in your hospital, in your state medical society, in other environments. And to get at something that Scott was saying earlier, a way to sort of showcase and promote and grow leadership within emergency medicine, so that we're a little bit more respected, not just as the frontline providers, but people who understand the health systems and kind of see what happens. My current hospital CEO was on the EMRA board with me. And I think he would definitely attribute some of his EMRA board experience as leadership development that helped him get to where he is as the hospital CEO before the age of 40 of a big county hospital. So I think that there's an opportunity there for us to help grow leaders who will then lead in society and help improve all of our practice and improve care for all of our patients.
I think that's an amazing idea. I was actually a first leadership and advocacy fellow for the state of Virginia. So, I think developing that connectedness between the different programs, I think is a huge portion of it. I think looking at, some help with, how do we get young physicians engaged? I think they all want to get engaged. I think it's a figuring out where in your profession you fit that in is really difficult early on. So trying to help kind of bring people, using resources from other states to help with that, I think, especially for smaller chapters, would be huge.
Yeah. And it definitely can't be a one-size-fits-all solution. Like, National ACEP says every state needs to have a leadership development program. Go. Like, that's not how it's going to work. But if we can sort of increase collaboration and networking and spread some best practices and good ideas, I think it could benefit everybody. And I think then it will help benefit membership, because if you've gone through this program, you're going to stay a member. You're more likely to be a proselytizer, sharing with others about what a good experience you've had with being a member and being a junior leader. And then it's going to help advocacy, because we're growing people who will be excellent advocates and take on leadership roles and help advance our mission. So I think it's something I'm really excited about. I think I'm going to pick some of the work we're doing in education as the most important work that I want to highlight as the answer to that question. So our education platforms, like our eCME, are like definitely outdated. Peer has been not up to staying up to snuff with its competitors in the board review studying, in-service studying industry. And I think that's something that's important for ACEP, both because of the connection that we have to members and providing it as a service, but then also for the financial viability of the organization. Having effective educational programming is important. We may or may not see an in-person ACEP 20 this year, which again highlights the importance of having education that follows you. It can't be just you have to come to one annual meeting to get education. And I think we're on the pathway to doing that. The board funded a strategic project initiative to update peer, meaning that we invested some money specifically in that as an important project. The education department has made some new hires and is sort of putting some new efforts in that area. I'm excited. I've just the past year been the education committee board liaison, so I've gotten to be a little bit more involved in the efforts that they're doing. And I think it's something that we need to keep investing in. And that I'm excited to say that I think within 5 years, we'll be seeing some major results and can be more of a leader in the education space for emergency physicians. The board as an advocate for the individual emergency physician is an important one for me that we've talked about, that I would like to, it's sort of like seeing some shift in that direction. And I think it's important that we keep seeing some shift in that direction. The leadership development aspect, the development of education. I think it's a really exciting time to be a board member with a new executive director. So I'm sort of excited to see what new energy she brings, what new focuses she might bring. I think having an outside perspective on our organization may highlight some additional new opportunities. So one of the things I'm really looking forward to in my next term, presuming I get reelected, is being able to collaborate with her and find, new opportunities that I don't even know about today, that are places that we can improve the college and improve the experience for our members. What do you feel like the average emergency physician in Virginia is looking for from National ACEP?
I think that if you look at the physicians who maybe are on the outside, I think, there's kind of the people who are actively involved, and I think they primarily are seeing most of their needs met. But I think really
Sorry, Cameron, go ahead.
The people who are kind of looking, maybe only join the years that they're making, they're going to scientific assembly for the discount.
Yeah.
Those folks, I think, really are looking for some engagement. I think the communication that the the feeling a part of it is really something that would be able to kind of bring them into the tent, bring them in to really understand. I think the education could be part of that. I think seeing the advocacy on a level to where they're like, that affects my life.
Right.
That really is something that I care about. I think that those are all big topics.
Yeah.
Scott, do you want to add something?
Yeah, Allison, I think that, thank you very much for taking the time. I do like a lot of your spontaneous answers for some of these questions. For me, and what frankly is 100 of my partners, we want to see advocacy by ACEP for rank and file emergency physicians. Yeah. And if COVID has taught us anything, it's that we need it, and we need it badly. And we want to see ACEP start to really demonstrate some of its influence within the House of Medicine, and quite frankly, within our specialty.
Yeah. Well, the due process legislation just got reintroduced this year again, so I'm hoping that that is something that's current, that can be pushed forward, that is all the more important. But I agree with, the need to have it be individualized in a way that speaks to the individual member, that like my practice today is better. The food and drink in the ED, I think, is a good example of that. I was talking with DC staff. They were having a meeting with JACO, and I was like, you kind of, like, this is actually kind of important. And they're like, but we have all these like bigger picture things, like, really? And I'm like, yeah, really, because it's really frustrating when you like can't take a sip of water for 8 hours. Like, that's real wellness. Like, we can talk about yoga and, all these other ways to wellness, but like really what I need for wellness is the chance to like eat or drink sometimes. It's pretty basic, especially if it's a 12-hour shift. So that was something that I was excited to see, that was very sort of individual physician, something I can see on my shift focused. I hope that we can take it even further in terms of, could we get more of a requirement that some kind of opportunity be available to you? Like, is there a way to talk to OSHA or that kind of thing? Because I know that the statement that we got from the Joint Commission is a good start, but doesn't totally solve the problem. And I hope that's the kind of thing that will really improve people's practice on a granular level, as well as help with membership. I always like talking with folks, so I'm like curious about more of your response to kind of what I've talked about, like particularly the board transparency. Like, is putting an agenda on the website, a few weeks in advance enough? Like, what more specific are you looking for?
I think an email
needs to be. Yes, we should be invited. We should be able to log in and view. We don't necessarily need to speak, except for the times that there's the public comment section. Mm-hmm. I'm on a committee here in the state where all the meetings are public, but everything is advertised ahead of time. The agenda is set. Anybody and their brother can come and can listen and can hear what people have to say, in order to ensure that there's transparency and accountability in what we're doing. And we need that. And if nothing else, COVID has taught us all, we can do almost anything via Zoom or some video conference format, and get engagement. And I think the board needs to just do it. They can't be like the Supreme Court and wait for the first time to ever allow audio in their chambers because of coronavirus. Right. This should be happening already.
Yeah, I mean, what the biggest challenge I see right now is that the timed agenda for the board meeting usually comes out like 4 days before the board meeting. And that is not, I don't think, sufficient timing for most people to be able to receive it, make time to, because you're not gonna wanna listen to the whole thing. You're not gonna wanna listen to 16 hours of board meetings over 2 days on Zoom. Like, that's not what most people are doing. So we gotta figure out how we can change that timeline a little bit so that we could be more effective in publicizing it. But yeah, like, why not use the council listserv to put it out ahead of time? I mean, they are open meetings, but you technically kind of have to email Sonia to know at like just the right time window to know what's going on, and it shouldn't be that way. So that is something that I haven't thought about as much lately. I definitely was thinking about it more when I was first being elected to the board, but sort of as you are in the sort of daily grind of board activity, it's not something I've thought about as much, but it is something that I care about, and I'm glad you've sort of brought that back to my attention, and I hope it's something I can work on in the future.
Because I would bet that the various chapters would assign some chapter leader, some board member to attend, someone would be listening in on every board meeting.
Yeah. I think that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'm curious to see where I can go with that, where we can go with that, where the board and the staff can go with that. That's another thing where I think it'll be, interesting to see the new executive director, sort of what things that we're focusing on and working on the most. I think another question that I would have had if you hadn't talked about it is, what do you guys see as the solution to the membership issues? But I think that we've sort of already been talking about that quite a bit. How is Virginia membership? Like, what efforts are you doing in Virginia specifically to try and engage membership and retain and recruit new members?
I will say that, oh, sorry, Scott, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that we have made a coordinated effort in the last 2 to 4 years at our annual strategic planning meeting to discuss and determine what are the things we can do that our membership can see directly impacts them.
Yeah.
Because lobbying and often in legislative advocacy often can be fairly nebulous for folks who aren't down in the weeds doing that and who are going to work every day grinding it out.
Yep.
So we've got to do some things that are very tangible for our members to show that the whatever it is, $1,000, $1,200 a year they have to spend is worth it to them. One of the initiatives that we're working on now is hopefully we're going to be able to provide our members with an opportunity to buy health insurance at group rates,
Nice.
Even though they're individuals.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So that's a huge thing for us, considering as someone, I've bought my insurance for years on the open market and you get absolutely crushed.
Yep.
And we're very hopeful.
I had open market insurance in Seattle before I moved to Houston. So I had the same personal experiences when I was a community emergency physician. So I hear you.
So that's one of the big things that we're on right now. And plus, we have enormous legislative stuff going on in Virginia. We've had balanced billing. One of our board, 2 or 3 of our board members are really heavily involved in that. And that definitely directly impacts physicians as well, because it's what we get reimbursed.
Yep.
Yeah, I think our executive directors, both our past one and Sarah, have been really working on member engagement. We've seen our numbers grow significantly in the last 5 years. That's great. I think we have really seen some benefit in that. And I think it does come down to some of that work for the individual physician. We had a penned law that was repealed. We had some balance billing stuff go through. Yep. We had, now we're fighting some Medicaid stuff that went through through a budget, not even legislatively, that we're working on. So really kind of focusing on things that matter. And we have a fairly young group, I feel like, and I think that energy helps.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, some of the advocacy wins, I agree, are hard to communicate about. Like it's sometimes hard for the rank and file emergency physician to see how the out-of-network win connects to them, especially because the details on the out-of-network billing stuff can be very confusing. But it is super important because at the end of the day, that's your paycheck, that's your reimbursement. So yeah, I think the more we can, continue to work on communicating why that's important and worth investing in with your membership is valuable.